78 years old. That's how old I was when I found out my granddaughter hadn't forgotten me at all. I was lying in a hospice bed in Columbus, Ohio. Room 14. The window faced a parking lot. The ceiling tiles had water stains I'd memorized by shape. One looked like a dog. One looked like the state of Florida. I had nothing but time and those ceiling tiles and the steady drip oven for that was supposed to manage my pain. I had not had a visitor in 11 days. Let me say that again, so it lands the way it landed on me. 11 days. No flowers. No phone calls. No footsteps in the hallway stopping at my door. My son, Richard, lived 40 minutes away. I knew because I used to make that drive myself. Back when I still had a car, back when my knees still cooperated, back when I was still welcome at the dinner table. But that's not where I'm starting. I'm starting on a Thursday night in March, a little after 9 o'clock, when the night shift came on and a new nurse walked into room 14 with a clipboard and a fresh set of vital stickers. She knocked twice, pushed the door open. I didn't look up right away. When you've been in hospice long enough, you stop performing for people. You stop straightening your hair and sitting up straight and pretending you're doing fine. I was lying on my side, facing the window, watching headlights move across the parking lot. She said, "Good evening. I'm taking over for Sandra tonight. My name is..." And then she stopped. I turned over slowly. My hip made that sound it always makes now, the grinding sound I've learned to ignore. I looked at her. She was young. Maybe 32, 33, dark hair pulled back, a stethoscope around her neck. She was holding my chart, and her eyes were moving across the cover page, the one with my name on it. Her hand had gone still. "Ma'am," I said. She looked up. Her eyes were full of tears, not the kind that spill over right away, the kind that sit there, glassy, barely held back, like water behind a dam that's one breath from breaking. She pressed her lips together hard, set the clipboard down on the counter, put both hands flat on the surface like she needed to steady herself. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry. Just give me a moment." I sat up straighter, my whole body protesting. "What's the matter, honey?" She turned around. She was crying now, quietly, with her back to me, her shoulders shaking in that controlled way that tells you a person has had a lot of practice holding things in. I said, "Who are you?" She turned back around, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and then she said 6 words that rearranged everything I thought I knew about the last 15 years of my life. "Grandma, I've been looking for you. Stay with me." Because what came next, what she told me over the next hour in that hospice room, I want you to hear every word of it. I want you to hear it because I almost died without knowing the truth. And because the truth turned out to be something my son and his wife had decided I should never, ever find out. Before I tell you what that nurse said to me in room 14, I have to take you back to the house on Briarwood Lane, Franklin, Tennessee, a 4-bedroom house with a magnolia tree in the front yard that I planted the year Richard and Beverly moved in. That was 1988. Beverly was Richard's first wife. A good woman. The kind of woman who called you just to hear your voice. Beverly gave me Camille. Camille was born on a June morning in 1991, and I was in that delivery room, holding Beverly's hand on one side while Richard held the other. When that baby came out, all 8 pounds, 2 ounces of her, and they put her in my arms, I understood for the first time what people meant when they said your heart lives outside your body. She had Beverly's nose and Richard's stubbornness, and somehow, against all odds, she had my grandmother's eyes. Pale gray, almost silver, watching everything. Beverly passed away when Camille was 7, ovarian cancer. Fast and brutal. She was gone in 8 months. I moved into the house on Briarwood Lane for a year after Beverly died. I slept in the guest room. I drove Camille to school. I braided her hair. I made her oatmeal with brown sugar in the mornings and let her eat it in front of cartoons, even though Beverly would have made her sit at the table. Some rules bend when a child is grieving. Camille and I were a unit. She called me Gram. Not Grandma. Not Nana. Gram. Like it was its own name. Like it belonged only to the two of us. Then Richard met Julie. Julie Hargrove. 29 years old. Richard was 43. She worked in real estate. Thin woman. Perfect nails. The kind of woman who reorganizes your kitchen cabinets the second visit and calls it helping. I tried to like her. Lord knows I tried. They got married in 2003. Camille was 12. She was a bridesmaid, stood up there in her lavender dress and smiled for the photos, and afterward told me in the car that the dress itched and she didn't like how Julie had talked to the florist. She was mean to her, Gram, right in front of everyone. I told Camille people get nervous before weddings. I gave Julie the benefit of the doubt. That was my first mistake. Things changed slowly after the wedding. The way changes always happen in families, not in one big moment you can point to, but in 100 small ones that don't seem connected until you look back. Camille would call me and tell me things, little things. Julie changed the password on the Wi-Fi and didn't tell me. Julie threw away Mom's photo from the hallway because it didn't match the new paint. Dad didn't say anything. Dad never says anything, Gram. I called Richard once about the photo. Just once. His voice got that tight quality it gets when he's uncomfortable, like a rubber band stretched one notch past comfortable. Mom, Julie is trying to make a home. She just wants things to feel cohesive. Cohesive. That's the word he used. Like Beverly's photograph was a design problem. I bit my tongue. I am very good at biting my tongue. I've had 78 years of practice. By the time Camille was 17, she was spending summers with me in Columbus. She'd drive up, she got her license, and that old Civic she saved up for herself. And we'd spend whole weeks just being together. Cooking, watching old movies, walking around Goodale Park on Sunday mornings. She told me everything in those summers. Everything Julie said. Everything Richard didn't say. She told me once sitting at my kitchen table, eating leftover spaghetti at midnight, Gram, when I graduate, I'm going to go somewhere. I don't know where, but somewhere that feels like mine. I told her that was the bravest thing I'd ever heard. She graduated in 2009, got accepted to Ohio State, nursing program. She moved to Columbus, 20 minutes from my house. I thought, this is it. This is our season. My granddaughter and I, the same city, coffee on Sundays, supper on Tuesdays. And for a while, that's exactly what it was. Then the calls from Richard started. He'd call me, not Camille, me, to tell me she was busy, that she had exams, that she was working 2 jobs and didn't have the time she used to, that I shouldn't take it personally if she was harder to reach. I wasn't concerned. Not at first. College is busy. Nursing school is punishing. I know that. But then 6 months passed without seeing her face. Then 8 months. I drove to her apartment. The building manager told me she'd moved out 2 months prior and hadn't left a forwarding address. I stood on that sidewalk in the February cold and could not, for the life of me, understand what I was standing in the middle of. I called Richard. He sighed that long, slow sigh. The one that means here we go. Mom, Camille talked to us about this. She needs distance right now. Distance from what? From me. She's at a stage in life where, Richard, tell me what happened. A pause. Then Julie's voice in the background. Soft. Just a few words I couldn't make out. Richard cleared his throat. Julie talked to her a few weeks ago. Camille said she feels overwhelmed by the expectations. What expectations? I just want to see my granddaughter. She's embarrassed, Mom. She said she's embarrassed to visit because the drive makes her feel guilty, and she doesn't know how to explain her life right now. He lowered his voice. She's going through some things. Personal things. She asked us to give you the message because she didn't know how to say it herself. I sat down on my couch. I sat down because my legs stopped working. Embarrassed. My Camille, the girl who ate spaghetti at midnight and told me I was the only person who made sense. Embarrassed to come see her old grandmother. Can I have her number? I asked. She changed it. She'll reach out when she's ready. Mom, just give her space. I gave her space. 15 years of space. 15 years of birthdays. I didn't know where to send a card. 15 years of Christmases where Richard and Julie came for 2 hours, ate my food, and gave me updates about Camille that were always vague enough to mean nothing. She's doing well. She's busy. She seems happy. 15 years of nodding and saying that's good. I'm glad. And then sitting alone at my kitchen table after they left, wondering what I had done wrong. I went over it 1,000 times. Was it something I said? Something I didn't say? Had I pushed too hard when she was in college? Had I not pushed hard enough? Had I, without knowing it, become one of those grandmothers who drains the room? I am a retired school teacher. I taught 4th grade for 26 years. I know how to read a room. I know when I'm wanted and when I'm not. But I could not figure out what I had done to make my own granddaughter vanish. So I did what women of my generation do when we can't make sense of something. I folded it up, put it somewhere deep, got up every morning and made my bed and kept living. I want to stop here for a moment, because if you're going to understand what that night in room 14 meant, you have to understand what I lost when Camille disappeared. I've had a full life, 51 years of marriage to Harold Green. God rest him. Harold died in 2007, 2 years before Camille started nursing school. He was a quiet man with a loud laugh and hands that always smelled like motor oil even on Sundays. We had Richard, and Richard gave us Camille, and Harold used to say that Camille was the punchline God saved for the end of a very long joke. Harold had a triple bypass in 2004. While he was recovering, Camille, 13 years old, sat by his hospital bed and read him Louis L'Amour westerns out loud because she'd noticed the paperback he kept on his nightstand. She read to him for 4 days straight, doing different voices for each character, messing them up, making Harold laugh until he clutched his chest and told her to stop because it hurt. He told me later that was the week he stopped being afraid of dying, because he knew his family was the kind that showed up. After Harold died, it was Camille who flew home from school that first semester, not Richard. Richard had a conference in Denver he couldn't cancel. Camille, 18 years old, borrowed $300 from her roommate for a last-minute flight, showed up at my door at 11 at night with a rolling suitcase and a box of the oatmeal I liked. She stayed for 10 days. She slept in Harold's spot in the bed, not in the guest room. In Harold's spot, because she said she didn't want me to sleep alone in that big bed the first week. That is who Camille was. That is who I was told had decided I was embarrassing. You understand now why I spent 15 years quietly wondering what was wrong with me. The years between 63 and 78 don't sound long when you say them out loud, but when you're living them alone, they stretch. I sold the house on Cranberry Hill in 2015. Too big for one person, too expensive to maintain. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a building called Sycamore Ridge. It sounds nicer than it is, but it was clean and had a good elevator and a community room on the 1st floor where they held bingo on Wednesdays. I did the bingo. I did the book club. I joined a walking group that met at 7 in the morning, even in January, because I knew what happened to women my age who stopped moving. They stopped moving for good. I had friends. Let me be clear about that. My neighbor Dorothy Sims, a retired pharmacist, sharp as a tack, ate lunch with me every Tuesday. My friend Paulette, from church, who has more opinions about casseroles than anyone I've ever met, called me every Sunday after service. I had a life. I want you to know that. But there is a difference between a full calendar and a full heart. I miss Camille the way you miss a specific song. Not a vague sadness, but a precise one. The shape of it was exact. Sunday mornings, when I'd walk through Goodale Park alone. When I'd make too much spaghetti and have nowhere to send the leftovers. When something funny happened, and I'd think Camille would have laughed at that, and then remember I had no way to tell her. I asked Richard about her every time I saw him. Thanksgiving, Easter, my birthday in August. The updates were always the same thin broth. She's good. Working hard. She's in a different city now. She asks about you. I stopped believing the last part after the third year. In 2019, Richard mentioned, almost accidentally, that Camille had finished nursing school, was working somewhere in Ohio. I nodded. Inside I thought, she became a nurse. Beverly would have been so proud. I did not say that out loud, because by then I had learned that mentioning Beverly around Julie was like stepping on a crack. You did it and something broke, and you spent the rest of the visit apologizing for the sound. I turned 75, then 76. My heart started giving me trouble, a valve issue the cardiologist had been watching for 2 years. In the fall of 2022, I fell in my bathroom. Nothing dramatic, just lost my footing getting out of the shower, and broke my wrist and bruised 3 ribs. I lay on the bathroom floor for 40 minutes before Dorothy heard me through the wall and called 911. 40 minutes. I remember looking up at my bathroom ceiling. It had better lighting than the hospital, I'll say that, and thinking, this is what it comes to. This is the corner you get painted into when the people who should show up have decided not to. Richard visited me in the hospital. So did Julie, briefly. She brought a plant I didn't want. Richard held my good hand and looked at the floor and said, "You've got to think about next steps, Mom. About what kind of care makes sense." I knew what he meant. I was moved to Meadowbrook assisted living in January of 2023. My apartment was packed up by a moving company Richard hired. Dorothy helped me sort through Harold's things, the books, the fishing lures, the model cars he built on weekends. Most of it went to Goodwill. Some of it went into a box I kept under my bed at Meadowbrook. In January of 2024, my heart deteriorated enough that the doctors had a conversation with me that started with the word realistic. In February, I was moved to Columbus Residential Hospice. Room 14. Water-stained ceiling. Parking lot window. 11 days without a visitor until a Thursday night in March when a nurse walked in with my chart and started crying. She stood in the doorway for a moment after she said it. "Grandma, I've been looking for you." I looked at her the way you look at something your mind refuses to process. Because the Camille I remembered was 27. The last time I saw her, she was standing in my kitchen on Christmas Eve, 2009, eating a Christmas cookie off the tray before I'd finished decorating them. She had flour on her sleeve and her hair was in a messy ponytail, and she was laughing at something on my tiny kitchen television. This woman was not 27. She was in her early 30s. Her face had that quality that Beverly's face had, a stillness underneath the expression, like still water. But the eyes were Camille's eyes. I know my granddaughter's eyes. Silver gray, watching everything. "Come here," I said. She crossed the room in 4 steps. She sat in the chair beside my bed, the chair that had been empty for 11 days, and she took both my hands in hers. Her hands were warm, medical hands, soft from constant washing, strong from years of work. She was shaking. "It's really you," she said. "Graham, it's really you." I could not speak. I am not ashamed to say that. I have faced a lot of things in 78 years. I have buried a husband and a daughter-in-law and 2 close friends and a brother. I have faced things that would fold a younger woman in half. But sitting in a hospice bed at 78 years old, holding my missing granddaughter's hands while she shook, I had no words for that. I just held on. After a while, she sat back and wiped her face. She looked at me the way you look at something you thought you'd lost for good. "I need to tell you things," she said. "Tell me." She glanced at the door, got up, closed it, came back, sat down. "I became a nurse because of you," she said. "Because of what you taught me about showing up, about staying when it's hard. I work in hospice because I know what it does to a person to be alone in a room like this one." She gestured at the walls. "I could not do any other kind of nursing. This is the only kind that makes sense to me." "Why?" I asked. "Because in this kind of nursing, you don't leave. You stay until it's over." Someone made sure I understood what it feels like when people leave. She met my eyes. "They told me you forgot who I was, Graham." I felt my whole chest go still. "What?" "That's what Julie told me. She called me in the spring of 2010, my second semester of nursing school. She said your memory had been failing for over a year, that you'd become confused and sometimes agitated, and that the doctors recommended limited contact with people from your past because it disturbed you. She said you'd had an episode when someone from your old school had visited, that you'd gotten frightened, didn't recognize her, and had to be sedated." I stared at my granddaughter. In 2010, I was 63 years old. I was teaching a watercolor class at the community center on Tuesday evenings. I was walking 4 miles every morning. I was doing the New York Times crossword in ink. "I want to be very precise," I said. "I am saying this to you clearly. In 2010, I did not have any memory problems. Not one. I knew who I was, and I knew who everyone around me was, and I have never in my life been sedated for agitation." Camille nodded slowly. "I know that now. How did you believe it?" She looked down at her hands. "Because Julie sent me a letter from a doctor. It had a letterhead. It had a diagnosis. It was written in medical language that I was only beginning to understand. I was 19, in my first year of nursing school. She sent it certified mail with a sticky note that said, 'We didn't want you to hear this over the phone.' A forged letter, or a real doctor approached with a fabricated story. I didn't know which yet, but it didn't matter which. The result was the same. My granddaughter had been handed a document that told her I was sick in a way that made my forgetting her make sense. And she was 19 years old, already without her mother, already alone in a new city, already working 2 jobs. She had believed it because she loved me, and because it was the only explanation that didn't require her to believe that I had simply stopped wanting her. And she had stayed away because she thought coming back would hurt me. I want you to sit with that. She stayed away for 15 years to protect me from a disease I didn't have. We talked for 2 hours that night. There were other patients on Camille's rounds that evening. She was honest with me. She said she needed to check on them, and she did, twice slipping out and coming back with efficient quietness. But she came back. Every time she came back, she told me everything. When Julie's letter arrived in 2010, Camille had called Richard. He confirmed it, used words like progressive, and it's difficult for all of us, and the doctors really do think this is for the best. She cried on the phone. Richard let her cry, and then said, "We'll keep you updated if anything changes. Focus on school." That's what she'd want for you. She focused on school. She finished nursing school in 2013, started working at a hospital in Cleveland. She thought about me every day. She said this without hesitation, without softening it. "Every day, Graham, I thought about you every single day." She would pass elderly patients in the hallway and wonder if I was somewhere like that. She chose hospice work specifically because she wanted to make sure that people like me, people alone in rooms like this one, had someone who stayed. She became the nurse she became because of a lie. In 2017, she moved back to Columbus. Different hospital, better unit. She had considered several times calling Richard's house to ask for an update on me. Each time, she talked herself out of it. Julie had been very clear in that letter. Contact should be minimal and low stimulation. Phone calls could be distressing. Visits were inadvisable. She trusted the letter. She trusted the letterhead. She was a nurse herself by then, and the diagnosis had enough medical specificity that it held up to her trained reading. But she had written letters. She reached into the pocket of her scrubs and pulled out a small thing, a folded envelope, old, worn at the edges. She said, "I never had an address after you moved. I kept writing them anyway. Some of them I addressed to the house on Cranberry Hill, and they came back undeliverable. Some I just wrote and never sent. I don't know why. I just needed somewhere to put what I was feeling." She pressed the envelope into my hands. I did not open it right then. I couldn't. She told me about the night she saw my name on the chart. She'd come on at 7, picked up her patient list at the nurse's station, ran through the new admissions. Room 14, Green, Harriet, Columbus, Ohio, 78. She said she stopped walking in the middle of the hallway. She stood there for a full minute, she said, because her body would not move forward and would not move backward. And she was trying to convince herself that Green was a common name and Harriet was a common name, and there was no reason to assume. Then she looked at the secondary information field. Emergency contact, Richard Green, Franklin, Tennessee. She said the chart shook in her hands. She set it down on the counter, took 3 deep breaths, told herself she was a professional and she needed to go into that room and do her job and see what she saw before she let herself feel anything. She knocked on my door. She walked in. She looked at me and knew. "Grandma, I have to tell you something else," she said. Near midnight, when we'd been talking for almost 3 hours, the hospital had gone very quiet around us. When I was in college, the spring of 2011, I called Richard's house. Julie answered. I asked her if there had been any change, if you were having better days, if maybe I could write you a letter just to, even if you didn't recognize my name, maybe hearing that someone loved you. She stopped, steadied herself. "Julie told me that you had mentioned my name recently. In a confused moment, she said you had said, 'Where is Camille? She used to come see me.' And then she said, she didn't know who she was asking for. She just said the name. She told me you were past the point of meaningful recognition. I was 64 years old in the spring of 2011. I was attending a monthly book club. I drove myself to church. I had just started taking a Spanish class at the library on Thursday mornings because Dorothy had told me learning a language at my age was good for cognitive health. And I decided if I was going to argue with Dorothy, I needed a better argument than stubbornness. "I want you to hear what I'm telling you," I said to Camille. "I want you to understand that everything they told you was invented. I am old now. I have a sick heart and 2 bad hips, and my hands shake when I'm cold. But my mind is exactly what it has always been. And for every single year of those 15 years, I knew exactly who you were and exactly where the hole was that you left." She put her head down on the edge of my bed and cried. I put my hand on her hair, just like I used to when she was small, and the world had been too loud. We stayed like that for a long time. The next morning, Camille came back on her own time. She sat with me for an hour before her shift, brought coffee, not the terrible hospice coffee, but real coffee from the place across the street. She sat across from me in the uncomfortable plastic chair, and we made a plan, not a revenge plan, not a dramatic plan, just a plan for truth. I needed to talk to Richard. I had avoided hard conversations with Richard for decades. I am being honest with you about that. I had bitten my tongue so many times over Julie that I'd lost track of what my real opinion even was anymore. I was a mother who had decided that peace was worth more than honesty. That is a choice. And it has a cost. The cost was 15 years without Camille. I called Richard that afternoon. Mom. He sounded surprised. I didn't call often. I'd learned that calling often made me seem needy, which was a lesson I never should have needed to learn. How are you feeling? I need you to come see me. I was planning to come this weekend. Richard, I need you to come today. A beat. Is something wrong? Is it your heart? Something is wrong. Please come. He arrived at 4 o'clock. He walked into room 14 and stopped when he saw Camille sitting in the chair beside my bed. The color left his face so fast it looked like something had pulled a shade down behind his eyes. Camille stood up. She said, "Hi, Dad." Richard looked at her, looked at me, looked back at her. His hand found the doorframe. "Mom," he started. "Sit down." I said. He sat. What followed was the kind of conversation that families sometimes have once in a lifetime, if they're honest, the kind you can unfold back to something smaller once it's open. I told him what Camille had told me. The letter from the doctor, the phone calls, the fabricated diagnosis, all of it laid out in the plain language I had spent 26 years of teaching perfecting, clear, without drama, in the right order. Richard's face moved through things I had not seen on it in a long time. Surprise, confusion, and then something that hurt me more than anger would have. Shame. "How much did you know?" I asked him. He was quiet for too long. "Richard, I knew she'd called Camille," he said. His voice was low, flattened out, like he'd already decided to say something, and now was just getting through the saying of it. "I didn't know she'd sent a letter. I didn't know about the doctor's note. She told me she'd explain the situation. That Camille understood and needed space. You let it go." He looked at the floor. "She said you needed a simpler life, Mom. She said the back and forth with Camille was hard on you. That Camille was going through things, and she'd come back when she was ready. And you believed that." He stopped, rubbed his face with both hands. "I let myself believe it, because the alternative was harder. The alternative was telling his wife she had done something unforgivable. The alternative was standing between his mother and his marriage. The alternative was choosing, and Richard had spent 20 years doing everything he could to avoid choosing. I looked at my son. He is 63 years old. He has his father's build, broad shoulders going soft now, and his father's way of looking at his shoes when something is too heavy for him to hold up and look at the same time. I have loved Richard his entire life. I am not going to stop loving him, but love is not the same as excuse. You had a daughter who lost her mother. I said, Beverly died when Camille was 7. You had a daughter who needed continuity, who needed to know that some relationships couldn't be taken from her, and you let someone take me from her. Richard didn't speak, and I sat in this room for 11 days without a single visitor, not because Camille forgot me, but because your wife made sure she thought she was protecting me by staying away. He put his head in his hands. I don't know how to fix this, he said. I'm not asking you to fix it tonight. I told him, I'm asking you to hear what it cost. Camille had been quiet the whole time. She'd sat with her hands folded, watching her father, and said nothing, because she'd already said her piece. Because this part was mine. Richard reached across and put his hand on my arm. I let him. He looked at Camille. I'm sorry, he said. The words came out scraped, like he'd had to drag them from somewhere deep. I should have known. I should have checked. Camille looked at her father for a long moment. I know, she said. Just that. 2 words. Clean and honest and carrying everything that went before them. I need to tell you about Julie, because you might be wondering, and because this part of the story is the part one think about most when I'm lying in my bed at night, listening to the parking lot and the hum of the hospital. 3 days after Richard's visit, Julie came. She came alone. She was dressed carefully, pressed slacks, a blouse with a collar, the kind of outfit that says, I am presenting a version of myself. She came at 2 in the afternoon, when the hospice is quiet and visiting hours are open. She knocked on my door. I said, "Come in." She came in. She did not sit down right away. She stood near the door with her purse strap on both hands and looked at the room, the way people look at things they've been avoiding for a long time. "Richard said you want to speak with me," she said. "I do." She sat then, in the chair Camille had sat in. She folded her hands in her lap. "I want to tell you that I was angry. And I was. But I was also tired in the bone-deep way that comes at 78. And I had learned that anger is most powerful when it is very quiet and very precise. Harold taught me that. He never raised his voice in an argument in 51 years of marriage. He got very still and very clear, and that stillness did more damage to a bad argument than any shouting. I got very still. "Why?" I asked. Julie's jaw tightened. "Hattie, why did you do it?" "I need to understand. Not an excuse. An explanation." She looked at her hands. "Then back up. Camille was going to move back to Columbus after nursing school. She'd already told Richard. She was going to move back and take an apartment near yours and spend half her time with you." A pause. "I have a daughter with Richard. Lily is 13 now." I could see what was going to happen. I could see Camille coming back and becoming the center of the family again, and Lily being on the outside of something she would never fully understand. She stopped. I waited. "I know how it sounds," she said quietly. "Say the rest of it." I thought. She pressed her lips together. I thought if Camille was at more of a distance, it would be better for Lily, for our family. I didn't plan the letter. It came out of a conversation, and then it became a decision, and then it was done, and the longer it went on, the harder it seemed to undo. I considered that. "Lily, I have a granddaughter I didn't know about, or rather, I knew Richard had a child with Julie, but I had not seen Lily since she was 3 years old. Another relationship this woman had managed and minimized. You used me as the tool," I said. "You told Camille I was losing my mind. You attached fear for my safety to her staying away. You weaponized her love for me." Julie said nothing. "That's not protecting your daughter." I told her. "That's teaching your daughter that love is something to be managed. That family is a competition. You win by removing the other players." Julie's chin trembled. She pressed her lips together harder. "I'm not going to tell you that you're a monster," I said. "I don't believe that. I think you were a frightened woman who made a cruel choice and then spent 15 years building a life on top of it, and now you're sitting in a hospice room wondering if it was worth it." She didn't answer. "Was it?" I asked. A long silence. "No," she whispered. I nodded. "I want you to do 2 things," I said. "I want you to sit down with Camille, just the 2 of you, and let her say everything she needs to say. Not to apologize. To listen. You let her talk, and you hear every word, and you don't explain yourself until she's finished." Julie nodded tightly. "And I want you to let Lily know who Camille is. She has a sister she's never been allowed to know. Whatever you think about me, Lily has done nothing to deserve growing up without a sister." Something shifted in Julie's face. Not transformation. I'm not going to tell you she became a different person in my hospice room. She didn't. Real change is slow and partial, and sometimes it never comes at all. But something shifted. She left an hour later. She stopped at the door. Turned. "I'm sorry, Hattie." "I know," I said. "Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe never entirely. I'm too old to offer forgiveness, I don't mean, and I'm too honest to pretend that 15 years can be undone by one sincere afternoon. But I heard her, and hearing costs me nothing. It just costs her her story. That I was willing to do. Richard had a harder conversation with himself than he had with anyone else. He told me on his third visit that he had spent 2 days going through his memory of the last 15 years trying to locate the moments he'd had a choice. There were many of them, he said, more than he'd counted on. Small places where he could have asked a different question, pushed back a little harder, called me himself instead of relaying Julie's version. He told me he'd been a coward. His word, not mine. I did not argue with it. I also did not let it stand as the only word. You were also a man who loved his wife. I told him, and who was afraid of losing another family. You'd already lost Beverly. Loss does something to people. It makes them protect what they have so hard they sometimes stop seeing what they're letting go of. He looked at me. How are you not angrier? I'm plenty angry, I said, but I'm also 78 years old and in a hospice bed, and I have a limited amount of energy to spend each day. I'm spending mine on Camille. He laughed a little, surprised himself with it. I squeezed his hand. He is still my son. He will always be my son. But the relationship we have now is going to be an honest one, or it's not going to be one at all. That's a boundary I should have laid 20 years ago. Some of us learn it late. Late is still learning. I have been in room 14 for 6 weeks now. The ceiling tiles still have water stains. The one that looked like a dog still looks like a dog. The parking lot is the same parking lot, but the chair beside my bed is not empty anymore. Camille comes every day that she works. She comes on her breaks, sometimes just 10 minutes, sometimes 30, and she sits in that plastic chair, and we talk about her work, about patients she's cared for who remind her of people she's known, about Beverly. Sometimes Camille says she is hungry to talk about her mother with someone who knew her, and I am happy to feed that hunger. I have 22 years of Beverly stories. We are only partway through them. On her days off, she brings real food, not cafeteria food, real food. Last Tuesday, she brought a container of chicken and dumplings from a restaurant on Fifth Avenue that she'd driven 30 minutes out of her way to get because I'd once mentioned to her 15 years ago that chicken and dumplings was the thing I wanted most when I was sick. She remembered. I ate 3 servings. My nurse, the other nurses who watch this, they stop in the doorway sometimes. I catch them. They look at us and something in their faces changes, and I know what they're thinking. I have been in this profession. I have watched families, and I know what a family that shows up looks like versus a family that shows up out of obligation versus a family that is making up for lost time. We are making up for lost time. And it looks like this. 2 women 3 generations apart, catching up on 15 years of ordinary things. What she had for breakfast. What I used to do on snow days when Richard was small. What Beverly used to call Camille when she was a baby. BB, that was it. Beverly called her BB. And when Camille says it, even now, her voice goes quiet in the same way that voices go quiet around sacred things. Richard visits on Saturdays. He and Camille are talking. Carefully, the way people talk when the bridge is still new and not yet tested with full weight. But they're talking. That is more than I expected. I have met Lily. Richard brought her 2 Saturdays ago. She is 13, and she walked into my room with her father's shoulders and Julie's cautious eyes. And she said, "Hi, I'm Lily," and held out her hand to shake mine like a small businesswoman. And I liked her immediately. She sat in the corner and watched Camille and me talk. And after about 20 minutes, she said to Camille, "Did you really not know about me?" Camille said, "I really didn't." Lily thought about that. Then she said, "That's weird. We could have been like texting." Camille looked at me over Lily's head, and I saw Beverly's smile on her face, quick and lopsided and surprised by itself. And I thought, there it is. There is the family that was supposed to exist. It is here, finally, in this room, 6 weeks late and 15 years late simultaneously. Now, I want to talk to you directly for a moment, because this channel is for women like me, women who spent decades being told to keep the peace, to give space, to not make things difficult, women who bit their tongues until they forgot what their own voice tasted like, women who, somewhere in their 70s, are wondering if the silence was worth it. Here is what I know at 78, lying in this bed with my granddaughter's hand in mine more days than not. Silence is not peace. Silence is just delay. Whatever the truth is, it waits. It does not dissolve. It does not go somewhere else. It sits in the space between people and it grows. And if you let it grow long enough, it takes up all the room. I spent 15 years believing I had done something to drive Camille away. I spent 15 years performing okayness in front of a woman who was systematically removing my relationships while calling it family management. I spent 15 years telling myself that keeping the peace was the loving choice. It was not the loving choice. It was the frightened choice. And I am old enough now to tell you that the frightened choice almost let me die without my granddaughter, knowing that nothing she did sent me away. Here is the other thing I know. It is never too late to tell the truth. I know that sounds like something you'd find stitched on a pillow. I know it sounds simple, but I am saying it to you from a hospice bed at 78. And I mean it in the most literal way a person can mean something. There are women watching this right now who haven't spoken to a grandchild in years. There are grandchildren watching this who were told a story about a grandmother that made staying away feel like kindness. There are daughters and mothers and aunts and sisters sitting on the other side of silences that someone else created and called necessary. Reach out. Make the call. Send the letter. Show up. Because the alternative is a parking lot window and 11 days without a footstep at your door. And the alternative is a nurse who walks into the wrong room and finds the right person and cries for a minute in the doorway before she comes back and sits down and says, "I've been looking for you." I asked Camille about a week ago what she would do now, whether she planned to stay at Columbus Hospice, whether she had other plans, a different city, a different unit, the way nurses move around when they're young and the whole country is open to them. She looked at me like I'd said something mildly ridiculous. "Graham," she said, "I finally know where you are. I'm not going anywhere." I didn't cry. I'm not a woman who cries easily. I never have been. But I held her hand a little tighter, and I looked at the ceiling tiles, and I thought about the one that looks like a dog and the one that looks like Florida. And I thought, I have memorized these because I was alone. I don't have to memorize them anymore. Someone is here to look at them with me. Camille has a key to my room now. She comes and goes during off hours. She brings the coffee from the place across the street. She sits with me in the evenings sometimes after her shift, and she reads to me good books, not the talk show memoirs the library cart brings around. Real books. Last week she brought a Marilyn Robinson novel and read 2 chapters out loud. And I fell asleep listening, which is the most peaceful thing I have done in 15 years. I don't know how much time I have left. No one in this building does, and we are all too honest with each other to pretend otherwise. My heart is what it is. The valve does what it does. My doctors are kind people who talk to me like an adult, which I appreciate, and they have told me to keep doing what makes me feel most myself. What makes me feel most myself is this: a plastic chair beside my bed that is never empty, a cup of real coffee that shows up without my asking, silver gray eyes that watch everything, the way they have since June of 1991, when 8 pounds and 2 ounces of a person arrived and made the world make more sense than it had before. I have my granddaughter back. I do not have the 15 years. No one is going to give those back. They are gone, and what was lost in them is lost, and I am old enough to accept that loss without pretending it doesn't hurt. It hurts. It will always hurt. A scar is proof of healing, but it is also proof of the wound. But I have today. I have this week. I have however many mornings I have left. And in every one of them, Camille's name is in the schedule. Room 14. Her grandmother. It is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. If you have someone you've been told to stay away from, stop. Pick up the phone. Find the address. Write the letter. Get in the car. Because somewhere, right now, there is a woman lying in a room like this one, looking at a chair that nobody is sitting in. And she is wondering what she did wrong. She didn't do anything wrong. Someone just made sure she couldn't find out. If this story hit you somewhere deep, share it with someone who needs it. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever been kept from someone you loved? Type found if you found your way back. Type still looking if you haven't yet. You are not alone in that room. None of us are. See you in the next story.